Okay, so we are going to be taking a look at what I guess you could call leaks, even though the Bleach Soul Resonance team did put this out themselves, but with a caveat. We're going to be looking at the leaks of the, I guess, 4 technically, but in more realistic terms, 3 splash arts of the duo releases that are coming in the near future. No, maybe not near, but future, right? So, for example, the Gin and Aizen one is one that was shown off pretty recently because we know that both Gin and Aizen are coming after Toshiro, right? Right. What we're also going to be trying to do is guess which element they'll fit into, and that's going to be a little harder. We're also going to try to give reasonings as to why, like lore reasonings as to why, which is going to be pretty funny. So, for example, we're going to need like a baseline. So let's say that, I guess to start with, we're going to use the main SSRs as a baseline, I should say, because Yoruichi represents Strike to me. She is the Strike DPS. I think the DPS are the characters that I would say most represent each element. So in this case, Yoruichi is a Strike character. Why? Well, what do you know? She literally punches you. As well, I think Strike characters tend to just have a very blitzy, fast, or by comparison with Komamura, very heavyweight, muscle, like very low technique in his case, whereas Yoruichi represents very speed, blitzy, fast, monk-like, martial arts-like combat, right? We also see that if we're talking leaks, by the way, so last chance if you don't want to hear leaks, if we're talking like Soifon, who is probably going to be a DPS, very fast, student of Yoruichi, etc., right? For thrust, we have Ikkaku. Ikkaku, I mean, I don't quite know why entirely thrust has just become the damage over time buddies, but I will say that thrust being helmed by Ikkaku as a DPS makes a lot of sense. His Shikai and Bankai are not only very reminiscent of polearm / spears, but his Shikai itself is, most definitely a spear. You can see that he is, he's holding that thing, right? So, as for why, like I said, it's become like a sort of damage over time race, I don't know. But I will say that if a character seems to be damage over time in my head, they will end up being thrust. And I guess spoiler, if you know what I'm getting at. Another character that we could talk about is Bankai Ichigo. I do think that Bankai Ichigo does end up being the most generic in terms of like element, because Slash feels like, I guess you could say that it's the sword specialist, but that doesn't really make sense if you were to take it to like expand outwards, because why is Kisuke Urahara a Slash type? Right? He is someone who, by all accounts, you would think would maybe be a spirit, but he is not. Whereas Byakuya, by comparison, is an incredible representation of Slash typing. I would say that Byakuya most represents Slash typing, but these are just weird little gray areas we're operating within. And of course, we don't have an SSR for spirit characters, but we do know that spirit characters with Aizen coming up, with Rukia and Orihime here, with Yuryu here, it feels almost like Hado adjacent characters, focused characters who have very strong elemental or otherwise focus, rather than strictly being swordsmen or what have you, right? Everyone, in the same way that like Roar Zabimaru over here, Mr. Show up, use my Bankai, get washed, is sort of iconic for just throwing that thing around. I think Toshiro, by comparison, is very iconic for showing up and saying, I summon ice dragons, right? So I'll say that's spirit. So let's get over to the actual, or let's jump over to the actual picture that I've set up, and we'll start laying out elements and see how right I am. Right, quote unquote. We'll see how good my guesses are. If you have any suggestions, maybe you think I'm capping, maybe you think lore doesn't add up. Oh my god, did she just glitch out? Did she just used her lightning step? Y'all see that? Thunder step? we'll see if I can nail these down. Be right back. So let us go ahead and switch over here and start with the ones that feel most obvious. Again, I'm sorry if this is like a big spoiler for you. I did warn at the start of the video that this is what this would be about, and we're going to just be talking very loosely about, you know, what I think will be coming, right? So if, you know, like I said, this isn't something you want to, you know, deal with, then I would skip out of the video now, because we're going to be making some guesses. We're going to be doing some speculating, you guys. We're going to be doing some speculating. So let's start with the boys we know are coming. That would be Gin and Aizen, right? Gin and Aizen, they're here. So let's say that is, and let me reveal these real quick. So that should be this guy right here and this guy right here, Gin and Aizen. This makes a lot of sense color-wise. I forgive me if I'm misremembering. For a long time in Bleach, right? Because, and to people who are like, oh, well, you're not really that much of a fan of the show, I promise I watched it while it was airing, and I read it until it ended. But that was over a decade ago, I believe, right? I know the show is airing now. I decided to wait until the show ends again before I catch up on all of it. I did watch a bit of it, but because I read it while it was coming out, it's not something I'm really racing to do. But remind me if I'm wrong, because this has literally been over 10 years. I think I was in school the last time like Gin was alive, you know what I mean? So Gin is, he sort of masquerades his Shikai / Bankai as a purely poison ability, right? For a while. And that's like a big reveal when it comes to Aizen. I guess I won't say anything else. I know it's like over a decade old at this point, but I won't say anything else just in case it's someone's first time reading through the series and they want to like have this experience for themselves. But I think that's what it was. You can correct me down in the comments below. Again, please be merciful. I promise you I was there. It's just been a really long fucking time. You know, like when people say like, oh, you can't do that math anymore. I learned that math in 6th grade. Well, it's been a long time since I was in 6th fucking grade. All right. It's been a long time. But yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense. Aizen using a bunch of Hado and just being a very like, you know, his Reiatsu is very dominant. His aura is dominant, right? He's a very tricky person. He doesn't really do much of a pure swordsman, nor would I call him like a thrust character, and then he does a bunch of damage over time. Strike doesn't make any sense. So Aizen being the prodigal spirit character makes, you know, just a ton of sense. At least until we get a different version of him. But I will say the elements sort of having some light coding means that I don't really even know when we'll get an Aizen that isn't spirit. I'll just say that much. But we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, I think this makes the most sense. I'm starting here just because obviously we know these two, right? These two are obviously confirmed. Let's get into the next ones. So the next ones I want to talk about are Yamamoto and Yunohana. I think that Yamamoto, the Captain Commander, will be a thrust character. I think it makes the most sense in the world. His entire thing building around fire, they could easily make it a burn damage, DPS, cash out. I think that while I do understand if someone wanted to say slash, because there's a lot of implications, again, I won't talk about too much because I know that with a Bleach game that is this fun, with a new IP that is this fun, there are people getting into the series for the first time. But I will say that I do understand making him a slash character in spirit. That said, there is something about him that from a gameplay perspective just makes so much sense if they decide to lean instead on thrust. I hope that makes sense. I'm trying not to say too much, but I do think like you can see the vision, right? Thrust makes a lot of sense for the Captain Commander. I think so. Yunohana, of course. I mean, how much do I want to say? You guys get why Yunohana would be a spirit character now, right? Because let's just say, and this is going to be a light spoiler, the other Yunohana is definitely going to be a slash character, right? Like so this one, who is focused, leading the healing brigade and all that. This one is obviously much more inclined to be a spiritual character. I'm probably going to use a bunch of Hado, not much swordsmanship to be found, etc., etc. I think I'm cooking here. I think so far I'm right. Yeah, obviously I can't say that, you know, we literally don't have this guy, we literally don't have her. But like, if I was to just be like way too confident, I'm like, yeah, I'm cooking right now. I'm cooking right now for real. Next up, I'm gonna call it Shunsui and Yukitake. For my money, Shunsui is just gonna be the Slash character. There's not many Slash characters in this batch to me, and it just makes sense for them to add one. That said, another reason I'm sort of adding him as a hesitant Slash character is because I could definitely see him then as a Strike character. He's very unorthodox, and I think that the Strike characters, I mean, you're looking at one on the left here. The Strike characters seem to have a very odd place in Bleach Soul Resonance. There isn't a lot of consistency. With the other ones, the other elements, you can say, oh, this character is this because they use Hado predominantly. They really rely on elements, yada, yada, yada. This character's thrust because they have some kind of damage over time thing that translates to video games very well. This character is, you know, a Slash character because they primarily, you know, operate around, you know, swordsmanship rather than any sort of special thing. I think in that way, you could sort of find Shunsui to be relevant there, but I could easily see him being a Strike character because Strike just seems like the land of the unorthodox, and Shunsui is, you know, a lot of people know is extremely unorthodox. That said, his boy here, Yukitake, is almost certainly another Spirit character. I could see Spirit getting a lot of SSRs going forward, because if we've seen the other data mine, there are so many Slash characters coming, which means that there's no reason they couldn't just overload on Spirit characters. That said, Yukitake is also a heavily elemental fighter. I know we only ever really see his Shikai, and you can see his Shikai in the art there, but, you know, lightning be my fucking sword and blah 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 be my shield and all this, like, it makes way too much sense for Yukitake not to just be a elemental summoning monster in the Spirit. I could see him being a tactics character. I see Yunohana being a support for sure. And then obviously I see Aizen being another tactics character, right? But there's no reason we're not just going to get ones that overlap, that power or creep each other, etc., etc. Yeah. As for Shunsui, he is almost certainly going to be a DPS, I'd imagine, for Slash. Though, with Kenpachi coming out and such, I mean, I don't know. He could be a support, because he does take up a little bit of a... Would you guys say that Shunsui is more of the acting support in his fight during the Arankar arc with Yukitake and Stark, I believe is who he fought? Like, do you... If it sounds like, oh, did you not read it? I promise you, I was there. It's been so long, and I've never rewatched the series. I've never gone on like a full reread either. It's just, it's a long way away. So I believe he fights Stark, right? Which I would say he could be a support, because there is like a little tag team element going on there. You know, they are fighting the big man himself. So that is something to consider. That is my read on him. So far we've got DPS, tactics, DPS, support. I could see support and I could see DPS easily, right? And last but not least, we have a support or a DPS. I think it's one or the other. I don't think he could be a tactics character. Next and finally, we have two characters we already know. Nemo, I believe her name is, who we could just be seeing another version of. She could be an SSR. Why not? I know some people would be like, oh, you know, they're not going to make an SSR of like Nemo. I mean, maybe they might. As for this position, you could also just consider this Soifon. I know this isn't Soifon, but we've seen the data mine of Soifon, so you could just consider this right here to be Soifon. And Mayuri, if this character isn't the support for Strike, to quote your rage, I'll suck a dick. There's no way they don't give them an SSR support when we know he's there. The Strike team needs a high level support more than anything. Mayuri's entire thing throughout every arc of the series is playing a supportive role. Does that mean he doesn't mop up people in certain arcs? Of course not. He cooks that around car. He essentially cooks everyone he goes up against. Like, that's kind of his thing, is that he's way too, like, he's unorthodox, but he's like way too powerful, right? That's like the thing about Mayuri. So if he is not a strike support, I would be really sad if they just make him another technique or tactics or DPS character. I'd be really sad. It seems so obvious, but yeah. I think this is how this is going to look. If you think I got them wrong or you have any reasons that you would suggest another element, please go ahead and leave that in the comment section below. I'd be really interested in reading those. I've done my best to sort of remind myself what each character is getting up to in their arcs. Like, in the arcs that these arcs are from, because, like, obviously, you know, this isn't TYBW and this isn't TYBW, right? So, you know, this is the Hueco Mundo Rancor arc. So we know what we can expect from these characters. We're not going to expect something from, you know, Yunohana, wink wink, that she wouldn't be doing. So yeah. But if you liked the video, subscribe to join the club. We all go make it, and peace.